You all set? Okay, I guess we'll open the meeting. Fire department. It's got some new sheets as far as, and what is which category is this? It didn't have it at the top on the new sheet you gave me, is that correct?
I think that's, yeah, 14, 15 would be the last
Okay,
category.
How do you wanna do this? You wanna start from, the equipment aspect?
Yeah, there's a couple considerations that I think the board needs to consider also with the fire department. But why don't we listen to the fire department reps, the chief, assistant chief, and then proceed on from there.
And everyone knows Chief Suarez and Eric Smith, who is captain in FDNY and also our assistant chief, one of them. And you know Anthony.
Good.
Okay.
Okay, so just basically review the sections that you guys submitted. I think everybody got a copy of the submittals from the fire department. And there's also, I'm sorry, Mr. Brown?
That one?
Yes.
Yes. And then after the submittals, if there's any questions or so on, and then we'll talk about some other considerations.
Sure. I've basically been the architect of the budget probably for at least 5 years. So when I was chief for 2 years, I would pretty much track every expense in the spreadsheet to try to really get, especially the contractual, like what we would spend on things. Because there was things that were never in there that would continue, like the maintenance of our air compressor, which requires a couple times a year. OSHA requires a certification on that. We have a vent, exhaust venting system. You know, we never had a line item to maintain those systems. So, you know, I think we got a much clearer picture on like our yearly spending, and obviously we try to tweak things to, you know, reflect the realities. So all the fire apparatus, the three, you know, major pieces of fire apparatus, you know, the newest one is a 2001, so, you know, the price, maintenance goes up on those. It's not excessive. I mean, these are not high-use vehicles, so I'm not in any way saying, you know, we're keeping, you know, bad rigs in service, but they definitely require upkeep and stuff like that, so. And then that goes on. We have one rig that's gonna hit 20 years next year, you know, one of our main engines. So that was the contractual. For equipment, we try to space things out. We try not to like replace anything major in 1 year. So, for instance, bunker gear, which is the gear the firemen wear, to cause the interior firefighters, the fighters that go in, that gear cannot be older than 10 years old. OSHA has adopted the NFPA consensus standard there, so that governs. And that's the rule there. We can't even send them to training because the date gets, you know, so even the training that goes out there has to have a year that's within 10 years old. They inspect that on the first day. So we've tried to stay ahead on that. We're always, we have a bunch of gear that expires next year. Same with the CBA, and I'm sure you may have questions about that. We try, you know, those are very expensive, so we tried to, we were in the habit of buying like 5 a year. But this year was interesting because the new standard was coming out and we were trying to figure out how we were going to deal with that. And, you know, I think most of the things in here are basic, but, you know, I'm sure any questions, I definitely will be able to answer. And that, I mean, that's equipment and contractual now. There's 2 things I'm proposing in the fund that I think is a good idea to have us in position to not have a huge line item in the future of the budget. I think it would be smart budgeting, but once again, any questions. You know, we can take them part by part, equipment, contractual,
Well,
and those two individual funds.
I think in the interest of, well, there are a couple
Yeah,
of things
so we're
that
not all over
I'm
the place.
interested in too, but if we could just go through them really quickly, and then people will have an opportunity to ask a question if they don't know what a smooth bore nozzle is,
Right.
or a fog nozzle, and just to clarify a couple items. And to make the case for a couple of the new items that appear on the list for the first time.
Sure.
Do you want to go with contractual or equipment first?
Equipment's easy.
Okay,
It's
let's do
a
that.
very short list. So the bunker gear is gear, you know, for those interior firefighters, that's a coat and a pair of pants, and it's running us $2,200. We purchased that. It's a New York State contract, so, and we actually are a member for free of Fire Rescue GPO, which is group purchasing. So occasionally, that has beat the state bid, and we've gone with that, but not always. So, you know, we have our own spec. I think it's a very responsible gear. We actually, you know, had a focus group that chose the new line we went with. You know, we had members come in, try different brands, found one that works very good for us. And it was a smart way to go. Things like removable knees, we used to have a lot of problems with a cut in the knee, we'd have to send it out to get it back. So that whole knee pad system just pulls out, we just put a new one in, it saves us, you know, a couple $100 actually to send it out, things like that. Helmets, we have a lot of old helmets. People like Charlie have helmets that are more than 10 years old. I mean, most firemen don't complain about that, they want like dirty helmets or whatever, but, you know, it's kind of silly that.
Is there a regulation on that from OSHA also, like how
It is
long you can keep?
10,
10 years for helmets also.
right.
How many, I'm sorry, going back to the bunker gear, how many need to be replaced this year, if any? No, I understand you put in 10 and you wanna have them to replace them if you need it, but if we were going just the ones that are expired, how many would, you know?
There's the way the gear went is they bought a bunch of gear in, they bought gear like when I came in. And then they got a grant to get everybody gear in 2005. And what happened was, so that was federal money and everybody got gear in 2005, which was great.
But you don't
But
wanna
the
replace
problem is-
everyone
right.
in 2015.
So knowing that, when I was chief, I was like, we have this thing hanging over us, and we started 4 years ago maybe, because we knew this was coming upon us. And there was a couple people with other sets of gear. It's definitely 6, but here's the problem. I can't, like what we do now is someone comes in and we have that 2005 gear, right? We have to send them to firefighter 1 where they go to our fire, and the first day, the date in the code is checked. They send people back. We're pretty good now, nobody gets sent back from us, but, so, if I didn't have, and we don't wanna give people a brand new set of
Right.
gear either to go out there for that, so, so it was working well, taking the stuff out of the closet that we had enough to send these people for training. Once they passed their probation year with us and stuff, we would outfit them with a new set of gear. That was working. The problem is now, all that extra gear that we had is not gonna be able to get us into anybody for that. So, yeah, we're kinda, we gotta address that.
Right,
So
toward the end of the
our
line.
idea, like right now, is some of them more active, like my gear is kinda beat up. Not bad, doesn't need to be replaced, but, and I'm a little bit of a common size, maybe we'll get another one my set of size, and then that second set will go to the next person going to firefighter 1. We have a couple people in the pipe, in the class that are for it, so, you know, 6 easily, and 8 minimum to be able to survive.
Did we buy 3 or 4 new sets this year?
We ordered sets, yes. It is a challenge, you know, just, because it's gotta be fitted right, I mean, we spend a lot of time with gear. And we had a lot of great gear, and I wish there was a way to get around it, because you can't even say, man, this looks good, and no one wore it. Usually an NFPA standard is a consensus standard or whatever, but OSHA adopted it, and the state has a policy on it, so when you go to their training, they verify it, there's like really no way to get around it.
Well, the standard, they have been measured for these.
Right, we bring them in and they get measured, because there's a lot to it now, there's a, there has to be a device to be able to bail out a window because of the state law, so it basically has a harness in it too, so it has to really fit the person there.
But exteriors, it doesn't.
Exteriors don't, and this rule doesn't apply to exteriors.
So we're talking about the 17 to 20 interior fibers.
Right, right. And actually, I've been talking to the manufacturer about some less stringent gear to possibly put exteriors in. And we may pilot with one or two members to see how it works out.
Less expensive as well.
Right.
Eric, what does SCBA, what's the acronym stand for?
Self-contained breathing apparatus.
What's the full nozzle, what that?
It's actually just that's the improper term, but it's a nozzle that'll do both a wide pattern and a straight. It's an adjustable nozzle, it can do more than one pattern. And it's used for multiple different uses, so like any flammable liquid fire, gas leak, car accident, you would want the ability to do that. But it also, you put in a straight stream load and we'll use that in your structural fire.
Is that a replacement for
Yes.
something older? Yeah.
Right, we actually had to we broke a couple, they got old, and we need to have two in the compartment to like kind of be right too, so, we just need to replace two older ones.
And a smooth bore nozzle?
That's just a regular nozzle, it's like, smooth bore comes right out there, I mean, I should've just put fire nozzle, but yeah, but that's what those are, the little
Just enough.
basics.
Not adjustable,
Right,
straight,
okay.
I-
We like it, it's about as basic as they come, but it's about as useful as they come, so.
The iPads?
All right, so, for a while, myself and some other people were looking at the ability, to have something in the apparatus to track, get you to the scene and stuff like that. It's always been available, but I always thought cross prohibitive because you would be dealing with a tough book similar to what police have and stuff. But the tough books like starts at $3,000 right there. And most of traditionally the software was very expensive to begin with too. And some of it was a little more difficult to use too. So with all the tablets on the market now, there has been some software. We watched it to see how it would work out. And there are some great, so now there's some very basic software that would allow us to do multiple things. So to start off with, when 911 dispatches us to a call, it is accompanied with, if you choose an email and a text SMS message, which, so for instance, with the software we were looking at, Active 911, it would immediately send the response to the iPads on this system. We would have them in the fire apparatus. As soon as you got in the rig, on the first screen, you would just hit responding, which would pretty much put you, out there for everyone to know that that rig was responding. It would navigate you to the call, and we would have our hydrants loaded into the system, which would allow you, as you were responding, to see where you're going and see the location of the hydrant. Additionally, it has the capability, which I would like to do, is to load some of the more important addresses in there, and you would have information on those addresses. And a couple quick ones that come to mind are, there's a bunch of houses that are on Burns Avenue that carry a Row Avenue address. That's a problem, because they're on Burns, you gotta go to Burns, that. There's a bunch of, there's 3 houses on Church Street that have apartments that are accessed from that back lot by the,
Taster,
yeah.
the,
And to tell you the truth, if you're not thinking that, I've actually been in those apartments on the Church Street side, and we got a gas leak, and we're not remembering what's going on, and some finally the tenant goes, you know, there's an apartment if you walk around the corner, like, so that important stuff, it would give us, you know, traditionally fire departments will have like a, you know, like a binder there and do it. The problem is in Highland Falls, you're so close, like the ability to check, then try to find the hydrant map page, to find your right hydrant, or to come up with that stuff is very difficult. The iPads, give you the ability to do it. And like, this is like a system that works real well. I was in Minnesota last month teaching a class, with the chief I know from a suburban department out there. I was in his vehicle, he has it. He was very happy with it. He has a city department there, and he has it in multiple vehicles.
It's like a hydrant locator, more or less.
Yeah, well, first of all, the navigation, that additionally apps that we would put on it is, there's one out there for, that would give us all the information on vehicles. So, when you go to all these car accidents now, big thing for us is, when we're gonna use the jaws of life, do we wanna cut that post in that car? Because there's a gas cylinder in there. It's like impossible to remember where all these things are.
Hybrids.
So they have a very nice app out there now, and I actually have it on my phone. It doesn't really work that great on my phone, it's too small. But you run that on there too, and you're able to immediately, you know, and it updates all the time, the model year, all that hybrid information, very nice, able to do it with that. There's a couple others for hazardous materials. Once again, I got them on my phone, but, that we would run those sort of things on.
what'd you do before?
The hydrants are always a problem. We have terrible maps, and honestly, depending on how close you are, you're attempting to get there in time. A lot of times you're guessing. Maybe you picked the wrong one, whatever. And
So on iPads, it gives you exact location of all items.
yes,
Oh,
Within
is there-
like a 3-block radius, so you'll get a large map.
and you also see everybody else responding. So for instance, we have two engines. Our procedure is basically the first engine comes from one side, the other comes to the other side. When that second engine gets on the air and starts responding and they hit their responding, they're gonna see where the other rig is in real time on the screen. You know, these things have been out there for a while. Most of the time they were running on the much more expensive, and they also required automatic vehicle locators in the old days. The beauty with this is it just uses a regular wireless card and is operating off the cellular network instead of, you know, I mean, if we had, you know, if you were doing vehicle locators and tough, you know, you couldn't even talk about
It's
something.
like $5,000 a vehicle.
But, I mean, it's an efficiency, it's an ability to know these hazards that you never knew before, you know.
Does it have ability to store like schematics of like bigger buildings? Yeah?
So,
You can put in whatever you want in there, like, that's the thing, he would show me ability, and he hits it. And, whatever you put in there, normally you save it as a PDF file, just because, you know, you can have your pictures in there, but it's nice and small, and, you know, doesn't share that, you know, use that much data, but very easily, yeah, that's the plan to do it. And those buildings come up like in red, highlighted or whatever.
So in terms of importance, if we had to cut anything, the iPad is more important than, say, the laptop?
Sure.
I would
I mean,
I would say the 4 iPads with mouse is more important than laptop.
right. I mean, yeah,
So one laptop's for what?
we have 3 laptops, the chiefs have laptops to, you know, do all the administrative work we do, so we don't have to be at the firehouse. So when we're doing training, doing these budgets and stuff,
Right.
we do this all on the laptop.
Is this to
The
replace
fire
one of
reports,
them or?
yes.
It'll be a
Okay.
replacement, right?
Right.
Um,
The fire reports we do on that.
The community cabinet. What's that?
That's what we put, it's what we store all the stuff in the chief's vehicle.
Okay.
Well, yeah, multiple things, but yeah, it's how we secure everything.
Make
Okay.
sure that everything's not flying around in the back. And the other app, one of the other apps on the iPad, that's functional, what you mentioned, bringing up a specific building, you can also use to load your pre-plans in.
Okay.
So if you know you have something like Perryman Hall, that's a large fire, and you pull that up, it'll show you, you got all these apparatus coming, and it's gonna show you specific placements of each vehicle, where they're gonna come, where they're gonna set up, so it's something that just will pop up automatically when you get,
Now, the cabinet would be for the assistant chief vehicle, I'm assuming?
the chief vehicle.
Well, the one that's in that vehicle is not,
A real cabinet.
no, it's not the one that's in that vehicle now, like, you cannot get it out.
It's specific for the vehicle.
Oh, okay, got you, so now I understand.
The SCBA face pieces, trying to find it, I thought we had budgeted for 22 of them out of this year's budget,
Right,
but we still need 8 more?
yeah. We replaced part of the change in the SCBA standard was, that the face pieces, that's the part that goes on your face, and we provide one individually to each member, cause they have to be fitted, by a fit test every year. They were upgraded big time in the last year. They were determined to be the weakest link. There was multiple firefighter fatalities with them. The International Association of Fire Chiefs advised fire departments to budget for that. It was a good idea. I was actually down at NIST. I got to see a bunch of face pieces that failed. So we planned ahead and budgeted for them. We outfitted the people we have, but we have a bunch more to order. We have 2 people in firefighting right now. We have a couple others waiting to go.
One's coming
Yeah. So, and that's just really giving personal face pieces to people. The ones that we have that sit on the rig in reserve, we have not replaced those.
The glass saw, what, I'm just curious to,
It's for cutting the windshield.
what is it though? I mean, is it like a battery operated,
No, you could do that too.
saw? Like
No, it's just it's a hand saw. It has it's just a very nice saw for cutting the windshield.
But how do you actually, what do you score the glass and then knock it in, or?
It actually has, on one side, it has a spot where you puncture through it, you hit it pretty hard, puncture through it with that, and then you get
Right.
the blade in there, and it's just nice and ergonomically, good way to do it like that.
It's a
Okay.
hand,
And it
it's a
doesn't-
hand.
It
it's
is
not
a hand
powered?
saw.
It's,
It's not power.
Okay. It's manual.
We can
okay.
use the Sawzall, but like we have our Sawzall set up with the bimetal blades, because they work good for cutting metal. That blade does not do any good at cutting the glass, really. You put the wood blade on, it cuts the glass pretty good, but
We're talking about the plastic between the glass, is what you're
Right.
actually cutting? Not
Right.
so much, the glass is already shattered, you're just cutting the.
But you gotta
the
cut it,
plastic
and
membrane
to
between
tell you the
glass.
truth, if
Well-
you see you see these new cars, a good example would be if you watched what happened in the city with that motorcycle incident, the guy's breaking the side window. If you notice something right there, that was not tempered glass anymore. So all these high-end vehicles have safety glass everywhere.
So it's not gonna shatter.
The windshield used to always be the only one that was the safety glass, the others would be tempered. Now, all these high-end vehicles have safety glass all around.
Okay.
So
It makes it real,
It would need to be cut, so if you need to cut a windshield, we're going from the bottom up, over and top, and it can fold down.
Okay.
It's not gonna shatter.
and that's replacing the one that's probably like 25.
Oh my goodness, yeah, since I remember.
Yeah.
I was just curious how your procedure on that
Yeah.
was, I didn't know if it was something
No,
you-
it's real
Poke a
simple.
hole through it and it's specifically designed to work on the way out, so the glass is coming out
Okay.
away from the.
The Sawzall works too, I don't like it because it airbornes it everywhere too, and, you have airborne glass particles everywhere, so. I like to use that manual saw instead of the Sawzall.
As much as I like making a fashion statement in the ice rescue suits, have we retired all the Gumbies?
This is the effort to retire those two.
We can save one for you if you like that.
Oh,
We're gonna.
That's
stitch your
what
name
those
on it.
two are earmarked for, those suits.
okay. How many Mustangs do we have?
I think we have 3.
Anybody got any questions on the budget for them?
What's the rescue, ice suit? How does that,
So that's it's basically a dry suit with a lot of buoyancy in it, and it's made to go in the water to affect the surface ice rescue. It's something you know, this capability we have, and we train for that, and we restart that yearly, and,
In January.
yeah. Well, you need ice to do it,
Sure.
but, yeah. So that's what those are.
Real quick, the batteries or replacements?
Right, so, we have portable radios for, every position on an apparatus in the officers, and, they tell you to replace them after 2 years, so we pushed a little, but now we have a bunch that are just going dead. You know, the lithium ions, which we have, lasted a while, but, it's, you know, they're all just starting to go now, and they're beyond their, lifespan, so, yeah, we need those.
You all set?
To go to contractual?
Yeah. Does everybody, unless anybody's got any other questions on budget or equipment budget?
Fire prevention. Is this to buy booklets and all of that?
Yes.
In the past, we budgeted 2,000. Might we scale it back to 2,000 again?
I think, you know, we run out frequently and we end up asking the department, also line items that too, so we definitely spend well over that amount. The membership, you know, usually pitches in. Now, I would say that we should remember that the membership now has, you know, the fire department, the volunteer fire company got a grant to get smoke detectors, and the matching funds for that are coming from them. So, they have committed to do that part, so I think it would not be fair to ask them to then, you know, buy the school supplies too.
So this is largely for the kids?
Yes.
Okay, for the school.
And the other events that we do, whether it be the, you know, fall festival or whatever else, when we have a table, we do fire prevention, that's what that line item goes to.
So none of this can offset the cost of the detectors? It has to come from the 501c3
Well,
aspect?
That's who we put the grant in through, so, and they agreed to do the match. I mean, I think that's the proper way to do it. But, yeah, village money will not be the matching for that.
And then gloves, hoods, and boots, that's a bump up this year also.
Yeah, you would normally think of that as contractual, previously we were instructed to put it here, basically because of the point that how long they last. They don't really last that long, so they are a recurring item. Unfortunately, they get more expensive. We had a great deal on boots, but those boots are no longer available, so they're much more expensive now. We haven't even picked what we're gonna do, honestly. We're done. But I mean, we need to order those, I just ordered gloves the other day because we're out, so, and we're out of hoods too, actually. And those are part of the protective ensemble that we have to provide that.
How long do the boots last usually?
I don't know, how long do they last here? It depends on the person, like, some of the more active, can definitely beat them up in 2 years, you know, the point, and then, you know, once you got a hole in them, you don't want them anymore, correct?
Right.
You know, you get wet every
You know,
time.
5 years at the max, depending on, like you said, the
What's a
activity.
pair of boots go?
Well, the ones we were getting were under 200. But the problem is, and that was like, there was like some knockoff brand we were buying that was made for MES, and they no longer make those. And honestly, all the other ones, I mean, like, they're for the leathers that we buy, that are really nice, but I don't know what we're doing, honestly. That just came upon us, that we can't buy those, we gotta try somehow. They're all expensive. I don't like the situation.
Mm.
We had a great thing going with the other side.
The vehicle maintenance. Is that for one specific truck, or is for all the trucks?
That's for all three.
Okay. But, were they all diesel? All three trucks?
All three are diesels. That's actually for everything, the command
Okay.
vehicles too, but,
Right.
and, yes, so there's a 1999 smaller rescue truck on like a E350 chassis. There's a 1995 Salisbury rescue pumper, basically. We have all the rescue equipment and it's an engine. And then there's a 2001 KME pumper. And, so that's, you know, that's the newest piece of apparatus. The one thing, and I'll talk about while we're here, is like, for the first time, put in for pump testing. Because honestly, in discussions with the fire commissioner and stuff on like a vehicle replacement plan and stuff, and knowing when, you know, traditionally, the fire department has replaced vehicles when they hit 20 years. And I'm not proposing to do that right now. I'll tell you the truth, that 1995, I put a lot of personal work into mounting equipment, keeping it up. We took 2 seats out of the back to get more equipment into it. You know, I think we've kept it up and, you know, it still works good for us money. But to have a real good picture, we need to do a pump test on it. We should, you know, a lot of places do them every year. Insurance services, which comes in and grades you for your fire protection classification rating, you know, wants to see that you did that, and you get 0 points if you haven't done one in 5 years. I don't know if we ever did them, we gotta do them. And that will actually give us a good idea of how good they're doing, you know, any of those centrifugal pumps as time goes on, you know,
Or they
how
just
close
put
they are to their
Add
rated
pressure on them or
capacity,
something?
right. So you got, you know, those pumps are rated at 1,250 gallons a minute. That's 1,250 gallons a minute and 150 PSI. They'll be put through the test. When they come out of the factory, they easily exceed that, but you see, as the lifespan goes on, they usually get closer. I'm not thinking that they'll fail it, but, there's definitely some repairs, especially to be done to the 19-year-old rating.
Well, generally, those pumps can be rebuilt, I would think.
Depends, and you know what, I don't
I
have
don't
to
know
cost
anything
on that.
about
I
fire
know
trucks,
Fort
I'm just thinking
Montgomery
pumps, you know?
had, they have an engine, their 92 engine, they replaced the pump in it, so, that pump failed, so. I mean, they had a pump issue and they did replace that pump,
And then
but that's expensive, so, I mean, the pump is one, you know, one of the main components of a brake house.
the better we do on these inspections, doesn't that have a good impact on people's insurance?
Of course,
Capabilities.
Absolutely.
you know, when you look at your insurance bill, your public protection classification is, you know, you're rated on that. It's a scale of 1 to 10. 10 is basically no fire department within 5 miles. 1 is exceptional. There's only 2 fire departments in New York State to get a 1. It's very difficult. It's not just the fire department itself, it's water supply, dispatching, even code enforcement. But we're paying attention to it. Unfortunately, the grading scale just changed. It seems like a lot of places are getting downgraded. Cornwall and Hudson just got downgraded. We definitely don't want that to happen, and that's not what I'm saying is gonna happen, but, it plays into a lot of things, record keeping, and definitely pump testing. So it is definitely in our best interest to, do that. And the ISO, rating schedule is also a good standard of best practices for a fire department, so we should try to follow those things anyway, which we do.
The last finding report, how long has that been?
2001 is the last one. It's pretty good. It's still our, the first apparatus out on a reported fire. It's all right. It doesn't have a lot of miles on it. But that's not the only thing, that plays into it. It is, it is a 2001. It's not new. But I think the pump testing is essential, and it may give us a better picture of like the serviceability of both of those apparatus. I would very much hope they wouldn't fail, but you could actually see, you kind of know what they came out of the factory at, and you kind of see where we are in the lifespan.
Ladder testing. Is, same thing with there's certain life expectancy, all your top ladders are like 300 pound or greater, or?
Right, the fire service ladders have to meet that standard depending on, you know, we have extension ladders and straight
Right.
ladders and they have those load capacities, yeah. So once a year, the guy comes in, he stresses it and puts all that
Okay,
weight on
okay.
them again. And they get a sticker. That's, I think that's a legally mandated, yeah, that's on the OSHA checklist, so they would
Yeah.
definitely verify that.
And that's true with the hydro test too.
Right, and that changes every year, because that, it's just the lifespan of the bottle needs to get thrown in 5 years, the bottle has a 15-year lifespan. And yeah, so I checked, we have 4 new.
Fire phone fax, I got a question
Oh my
on that,
gosh.
I didn't know what
Yeah,
that was.
all right, so the 911 sends you a tear and run sheet, basically, and I recall everybody's supposed to have one of these, and that is for a phone. Now, I would hope that we're gonna get these iPads and do that too, and we have a Verizon bill with them. My plan was to attempt to somehow make a package, and we'll see, you know, where that goes, but that is basically for the fax line.
Okay. So it's just basically a landline for,
It is.
so the 911 sends you a fax, you guys go out the door
They
with that?
send you to, now, we don't really use it that way. Some places I guess do, honestly, now with the days of everybody gets a text message of the dispatch with that. Most people go with that. At the completion of the call, they do send you a fax with all the pertinent times, which you use to do your fire reporting and stuff. So we definitely use that part.
Time of call, first unit on the
Yeah,
air,
all those
first
things
unit
that-
responding,
Yeah.
one time you're on the scene, what time is it under control,
Right.
you know, returning, you know, mutual aid returned at this time, so it's all on your fire reports.
Okay.
Okay,
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
would you need that if you had the iPads? Is that something that could be deleted, or is that still going to be in use? with the
You know what
iPads?
I have to ask, I think you still need it, honestly, the iPads will give us a lot more capability, honestly, because because you have the ability to hit responding and on the scene.
You could be
And
driving
those
out
are
the
good,
door,
Yeah,
kinda,
but
right?
those are good benchmarks, like honestly to have, and you don't always get the full picture, like not every unit calls responding on the scene. And there's standards you wanna meet with that, you wanna know that you have your full first alarm assignment there, you know, within 10 minutes and things. So the iPads give us a lot of capabilities. I'm not sure we can totally go away with it, but what I'm saying is, I would think that our services for the iPads will come through Verizon. And, I mean, there's gotta be some way to get this, to package it better. I mean, maybe the bill and all the Verizon stuff should be together if we can save with it, but,
some bundle, if you will.
Right.
The iPads and the fax line to something where it's not,
right,
you know, $1,200 a year for a fax line.
Okay.
is this a typo of the training? It costs 7,000, but you're requesting 5?
oh, I don't know why that looks like that. I did lower it.
Oh, good. So 5 is real.
I don't know, let's see, you know what, I don't know why it reads like that. That's definitely a spreadsheet error, because that should have carried it over, the 1 times. But I did, yeah, I did drop that when I was attempting to get inside that 2% over fiscal year 2013-14, I did go and drop that to 5.
And part of Eric's ability to drop it is because he provides so much training for the fire company.
That's good.
We don't really use any vendors for training, so for
Okay.
instance, to meet that requirement with the escape boats and everything, most departments use a vendor to come in and do that. But we're lucky, we do it in-house. We have a number, Chief Suarez is also a nationally certified fire instructor too. We have good relationship with West Point, so we go there to do the training. And there's a lot of, you know, give and take. I helped this guy, now I got, you know, he helps us, I gotta go teach class in his department in Pennsylvania, so.
What's the charge for the class that you just did in Minnesota? If you were a contractor charging a fire department, or roughly,
It's more than $500.
so that's how much a class would cost. from a contractor. If
No,
he was-
that's not how much 2 hours would be, but that class, when I do the second part, will be 4 hours, yeah, we do 4 hours.
So,
Firematic aid, I'm not sure what that is.
That is food. When we're in firehouse, when we have even training and that is what that is.
And thank you for lowering the chief's allowance.
oh, you,
Well, there's a reason for that, and that deals with we were allowancing the 2 assistant chiefs more because they were using their personal vehicle.
So
And then-
it's,
So we're really just allowancing them because we don't provide cell phones. In the past, everybody had a village issued cell phone, which I never liked the idea of anyway, because I had my own personal cell phone. The planning board was trying to give me a cell phone. I was not gonna walk around with 3 cell phones. And it was not an economically good idea, so we just, it works much better that way.
What's gas meter calibration?
So we have gas, we've got a lot of gas leaks, we have a couple, we have gas meters on all the rates, and, they gotta be calibrated, I calibrate them every 6 months. So we don't even pay to do that, that's just to get that's for me to get the test gas and stuff, I do it.
They mount it right to the rig, the gas irons, like on the bumper, like Central Hudson and all that, or you have like handheld units?
Yeah, they're handhelds.
Okay.
And we bought one specifically so they would be easier to do in-house.
Right.
Like the old ones were always tough, this is easy, I do them once every 6 months.
So that's a gas detector then, that's what it is?
That is, it tells you, if you're in a combustible range or whatever. So we do those in-house, but that's to actually get the test gas and stuff to do. It would be much more if we sent them up to the vendor, but we purposely bought one so we could do it ourselves.
admin services,
That, I believe, is part of the, it should all be in with the software, actually.
Which one, the computer license software?
Yes.
Okay. So to back that out or not?
Well, you know what, admin was also thrown in there to be able to assist it, so the fire chief could actually get someone to assist with paperwork. I don't know, I never did it. I mean, the fire chief needs it, honestly, needs secretarial help to do that. I mean, I'm not sure that amount of money would do anything, though, honestly. Not that Gina doesn't handle all the low staff and, which is a big help. I don't wanna throw that by her.
Plymouth.
Plymouth. So those are-
Plymouth.
That's the exhaust system that we have hooked up to all the apparatus.
Oh, for the trucks, for the
Yes.
cost of building?
Yeah.
So what does that fee for, I mean, it's in-house and it runs on electric and
Right,
it's all ducted and it's,
it needs to be maintained, and we got away with 5 years without doing it, but,
okay.
it did, it needs probably no good, it's probably not doing us a lot of good right now without the filters change and everything
Right.
like that.
The Nike
And we never
Before.
budgeted that before, and
Okay.
that was a pickup, that's why it's down towards the bottom.
And like you stated, all 3 are diesels.
Right.
And the exhaust, the exhaust that diesels let off, especially when they first started.
That generation of diesel definitely.
Now, what do you do with that? You start, how does that run? When you turn that on before you go into the truck area or?
It's automatic. Once the vehicle starts, it'll sense the exhaust. It comes on, the vacuum comes on. It stays attached to the exhaust pipe. As the vehicle's driving out,
It releases.
it'll hit a vacuum switch that'll
Right.
release the air pressure that holds it onto the exhaust pipe,
Okay.
and it'll fall off.
So as soon as the diesel starts, that fan kicks in, the electric motor runs and starts vacuuming.
Right, the vacuum, fans kick on, so all the exhausts, the fuse out.
Right,
And then once it's on a slide,
right,
once it gets to the point where it,
let's go.
the air pressure releases the ductwork from the exhaust pipe.
Any issues with that, not releasing?
No, not really. I mean,
Okay.
we've had minor repairs, but, not as bad as you would think. Not, I mean,
What about your cord sets for your, you have cords on the trucks too, right, that you plug in and,
we just put the good ones in now because we had a big problem with that in the past year. We came in and the rigs weren't, we had a bad we had a bad system. We had extension cords, we did not have retractable cords.
Right.
We had extension cords, and the extension cord today is to an outlet in the ceiling. And the whole thing was not, you know, we had ignored it or whatever, and it came back to get us one day. You know, it was probably a fuse issue with that too. But they had a call, and then 2 out of 3 rigs was dead. So, we immediately dealt with that. They now have nice retractable cords.
do they
They're
still have
on-
to be unplugged manually when you do
No,
that?
they have an auto eject,
Okay, all right.
right. But we had old cords in a bad situation. That's been rectified.
You've done quite a bit of updating over the years.
We tried to, yeah.
Tried a lot of updating. He's not to tap Eric on the shoulder, but he's done a lot of updating on everything.
We just tried to stay
In-house.
ahead, yeah.
Try to stay ahead of the game and not cost any money. And the amount that he's probably saved is astronomical by doing everything in-house on his own time.
Like one time you just had a space, you couldn't target between the wall and
We did, we moved,
Yeah.
but, you know, a lot goes out to the membership for allowing us to have that room, but that was a bad situation, and I'm glad we were able to, formerly, all the gear was in the room with the trucks, there was not enough room, so people would be putting gear on and trucks were leaving. I was chief at the time, and I was very uncomfortable with it, so,
Very unsafe.
we approached the membership. There was basically a club room with a pool table in it and everything, but we got them to agree to using that. So that room is basically used as a ready room, all the gear's in there, people get dressed in it, it's right off the apparatus floor and then walk in. That was a good move.
but that was very close.
It was way too close, yeah, yeah.
Oh.
I'm glad we,
Yeah, I
were
was
able to
between
change
2
that.
trucks,
Yes,
my
right.
gear.
That was bad.
The doors opening on the
Yeah.
trucks with the gear racks, it was just too close.
Right, so, no, it's worked out very well being in the back.
We was talking about one time the height of the door in the vehicles, how did that work out?
It's that door is very low, that one rig that's 19 years old, I mean, there's not even 6 inches. Actually, if the 750 gallons of water is not in the apparatus, it cannot back. We bought, we bought tire chains for the other engine, I wouldn't buy them for that one, just
No.
because I think it would be too close, I think it could hit.
And it's.
I mean, we even have
it's
to
a
pay
matter-
attention to make sure there's no snow buildup there. It's very close if you watch it,
It's,
where it is.
I guarantee it's under 6 inches, because if the deck gun isn't all the way down,
Right,
it.
No, it's very close.
It'll hit. It'll hit.
it's very close. I mean, that would limit, there's no ability to even replace that. That apparatus replaced the ladder truck, and there was basically no way that they were gonna able to place it with a ladder truck, because they could not find one under that height.
And after the remodeling that we did, it's the same height that it was before.
Somebody got any other questions on contractual work? Is there anything you added on that?
Not on the O2 and O4, I do have some stuff on truck room
Truck room,
and,
Police?
We don't have
Oh.
anything to do with that, right?
No, I didn't, no, I didn't.
No, honestly,
No,
and this is funny,
No,
'cause this
that's, I didn't know that.
This rent could actually continuously come up. When I was just chief, that line item used to be in the 04, and I successfully got it out, because that's like the separate organization, that's the board of directors, they own it, and the fire chief has nothing to do with it, and it was like, I thought unfair to the fire chief to have to come in and, well, he doesn't even have any ability to negotiate it.
Well, have we
But I thought,
received a number from
I almost thought that there was a long-range,
Well,
Agreement with
well,
that.
the issue with it, there is a lease agreement for 3 years, but it's a little open-ended, so I was looking for a little bit of information on the,
Oh, the painting of the ceiling.
well, there's some open-ended items like replacement of light bulbs, painting, some other things. Also, power, the village is responsible for power, so basically on the estimates that I have, about $750 goes toward power for the room. Which, again, it is what it is, it's gonna be factored in here. But right now I set it at 25,000. The agreement calls for it to be 23,811. It's $23,811 for this year. If I add the power, that puts me at 24,500. But last year there was $2,400 in painting costs. So I need to know, is 500 enough for this year for any potential painting, or is there another painting project coming up that we have to put more money forward? Because, I'm sorry,
It's not done.
what happens here is that if we don't budget properly for it, we gotta get it out of contingency.
right now, I understand, and he can answer, it's only the uncomfortable is like, we're not, the board of directors, are the custodians of the building,
Well, I know Pat Patterson was sort of aggrieved that we didn't have the luxury of time to use our own manpower to paint the truck room in time for the big hoopla
Right.
this past summer. So maybe even if the ceiling is gonna get painted this year, we do it ourselves.
We could bring that up to the membership.
And it may not
but that's
be
not,
in their
I mean,
plan either.
Well, I
Right.
guess what I'd ask you is if you could go relay that to the board of directors and let them know that 500 has been set aside in the budget for those ancillary costs. If it's gonna be
Okay.
more than that, they probably should give us something in writing to that effect.
Now, in the past, at times, like, for instance, one time, I did budget in the fire chief, in the regular contractual to do some improvements there. I did the apparatus doors, the safety eyes, because
Needed to
they
be
weren't
done.
on there.
Yeah.
I mean, the liability of both damaging your equipment and safety, so when we see things ahead like that, we would normally, I personally would just throw it in the budget, but we don't have any plans for improvements in there this year.
No.
So,
Like, we did we did those retractable reels after we got caught in a bad situation. There's nothing, in my mind right now, that's hanging over us for that. I mean, the ceiling should be done too, than we did the other.
We could bring it up to the board.
Yeah, right now I have 500 put in there for those ancillary costs.
And that's what it's covering, bulb replacement. and
That's basically
cables
what,
and stuff.
bulb replacement, some paint, maybe to do some minor paint work.
They might come back with more, because I know that they were talking about maybe the fixtures, the light fixtures in the truck room. But I'll talk with Pat Patterson
Okay.
about that.
All right, well, right now it's set at 25,000 for that, with that $500 cushion there. The other thing that I want to kind of point out to the board that came out of the state comptroller comments about long-term capital plan. One of the things that I think that, and it's not just fire department, it's any equipment like vehicles or fire apparatus, is a capital reserve, setting up a capital reserve. Right now, the village owes about $170,000 on the fire truck from 2001. Or 2001 is it, or 2000? Yeah, 2001 pumper. It's part of a serial bond that that now is reconfigured into 2012. So we owe still a good 10 years worth of payments on that truck before it's paid off. The problem I see is that we're doing deficit borrowing to pay for the trucks instead of putting money in a capital fund ahead of time so that when the truck's due to be purchased, you have at least half the money to pay for it, which then saves you on the finance charges and everything. There's really no provisions for that. So, you are making provisions for fire apparatus, which is a type reserve, which we can set up.
Well, that command vehicle reserve is, you know, off of, you know, we just authorized purchase of a second vehicle. And I think the fire department believes we should maintain two, and a lifespan of 10 years. So that's where I came to with that fund there. Something we've never done before, that request of 8,000.
Yeah, well, what I'm saying
Well,
is
you're
that-
saying we should do that for the major accidents.
Absolutely.
And what you just said, Ed, is magnified even more by the fact of the years of those rigs that I just pointed out. 95, 99, 2001. I mean, that's what bothers me more than just saying, you know, we're all right, maybe we don't need to replace it right now. But what scares me is we get in a situation where we have all those trucks beyond like a reasonable lifespan, and then the major problems start happening to us. So I would caution the board about thinking we can just be pushing off replacement of any of these rigs there. Because they're, you know, they will become cost prohibitive. At
Well,
that.
that's why I'm
that's the
saying
point,
that.
Right,
Yeah.
so we
that in
got.
We don't
addition-
wanna bond it.
Right.
Going down the road, we don't have to bond something if we got a capital reserve.
I
fund.
mean,
Yeah, the history
But-
has been, a lot of this stuff has been bonded. Bonding, you know, we bonded front-end loaders, we bonded other pieces of equipment, we're bonding fire trucks. At the end of the day, if you're not prepping for those purchases, our debt just continues to balloon. So while I see that you're putting $8,000 for a reserve fund related to the command vehicle, which I get,
Yeah,
equally, there probably should be some considerations for a reserve contribution to a new truck. Because based on the ages of your trucks, if you don't start now, the village is gonna be spending another $300,000 and it's gonna be debt, because there's no money to do it for a new truck.
the replacement value of that 1995 rig would be in $400,000 to $500,000 range, and closer to $500,000.
A new
Fort
truck.
Montgomery's tanker that seats two people that they just bought was over $400,000, so.
Yeah, so, you
I'm saying that, but I don't know, it was much easier to calculate what a proper number to put in for that command vehicle on the 10-year lifespan, buying one every 5, than to
Yeah,
decide,
that's an easy
than
decision.
to decide that issue with the 3 vehicles. And, I mean, part of the reason for the pump test is to get a clear indication where we're at with like a replacement scheme.
Well, if you have this in a fund that's earmarked for vehicles, and all of a sudden, the good problem would be you have $200,000 sitting there and nothing to do with.
No, I understand that, yeah.
But at least we have it, and if, let's say, at that point in time, the thing just blows up or is no longer cost effective to fix, our borrowing is a lot less than it would be if we went out today's dollars are cheaper than tomorrow, so looking out 10 years from now, if it blows up, we're talking $500,000 for a vehicle, and we don't have anything set aside, so,
If that's the route you guys wanna go, I'll
Yeah.
just say traditionally, not only in the village, but plenty of places, the vehicles are bonded in plenty of smaller municipalities. So, that has always been the case here, I mean, that's how our neighbors do it, you know. Where I came from across the river, they would borrow the money for that too, so, if you're saying we wanna make that change, then we
Well,
gotta decide to be budgeted in that way.
I'm
then.
just recommending that you consider it, because remember, the fire districts have a little different, the town fire districts have a little different deal, because that, I believe, is subject to a referendum when they buy a truck, whether they bond it or they put money aside for it. So essentially, that individual purchase gets voted on. Where in the village, essentially, the buying of a truck, setting up the reserve fund is the only thing that really could be considered a permissive referendum. Once you do it, the expenditure is already there. It's not subject to, let's say, a public debate. So, I'm just making a recommendation that it's tough to put a reserve fund for a command vehicle and not have one for a fire apparatus. That's mainly my logic.
Except, are we still eligible for no interest funding through the state?
You know, I never used that, I was never a member of the department, and no, I understand that funding stream, but I don't have any intimate knowledge of it, if it still exists or whatever. I thought there was a lot of, requirements that you're almost a rural community. And unfortunately, when you plug in 4,000 and 1.1 square miles, you never meet the criteria. It's true though, when you go, a lot of those grants, the first thing you do is they like categorize you, and Highland Falls comes back as like urban, you know, but,
Yeah, so that's just consideration.
my concern there is, then you would just have to realize that, you know, we're talking about a level of funding the fire department that we're not previously, like, it really can't come out of what's already here, but I
We
agree with
understand
you.
that, yeah.
That's on the,
Yeah,
I mean,
next-
we got
next year,
3
we'll-
on the
we'll look
horizon.
down the road, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it's really how the board wants to look at it, but I do think that basically on the state's comments about capital, long-term capital planning, and the fact that there's an interest in setting up a capital reserve for a command vehicle, I think there probably should be strong consideration that reserve consider a replacement vehicle, especially on the age of the fleet. Because if you don't, at the end of the day, you're gonna be borrowing money for a new truck. Because that's where it comes down to. It's not, the fire districts run a little differently, but it's still, they're borrowing money too. The only difference is it can be rejected. Here, it's not necessarily rejected unless they don't want you to put a reserve fund together, which I can't imagine the voters would be against building a reserve fund to take care of stuff like that. So, again, you know, nothing has to be decided right now. I'm just putting it out there that the state's asking for it, and, you know, it makes sense.
They're asking for it specifically for firefighting?
Not for fire department, it's just that in general, the village has not done capital planning and hasn't set aside funds for long-term capital planning. And that's part of the reason why there's such debt, because everything ends up being bonded out because there's no reserves. So you gotta start somewhere, you know, if we push it another year, then we're a year farther down the road. As far as the fire department's concerned, like I said, my only statement is that to somebody that might not necessarily understand fire, or how important a command vehicle is versus a fire truck, if you do one and you don't consider the other, they probably could ask questions as to what's the priority.
Other than the fact that a fire engine has a 20-year plus life expectancy, which is a legitimate bonded item. A command vehicle, 10 years.
yeah, and I think that's how you know, came to that in the past was, you know, if you look on the wall in Island Falls and you look at the rigs, it's almost pretty, you know, similar that you went 20 years with those engines, and then they would do it. So if you were on the 20-year bond, it was, you know, maybe they should have been putting that in the fund instead of been paying, you know.
The other thing that we've been batting around downstairs is whether or not we can legitimately ask the developer of the new 4-story hotel to chip in for a new fire truck, since they would benefit from its use.
Into the reserve fund, if we start, maybe next budget, we'll sit down and prior to the budget, set aside a earmark section for funding, and we'll pursue that type of thing, and
Instead of recreation funds, firemen.
yeah, they're not as much fun to do, but it's still something that we're, you know, the long-term, interest on the long-term 20-year debt is a whole lot of money, you know, and we're all paying it.
Well, you know, here's a good example. If you put away the truck that was bought in 2001 cost $244,000, the debt service on it is just over $400,000. So if you're able to put away money every year, let's say you put $20,000 away for a truck, after 20 years you've got $400,000, all of a sudden you win on both ends, because you don't have debt service, which is almost 70% of the original cost, and you essentially get the fire truck for what its price is instead of price plus debt. So there is a compounding factor related to setting aside the funds, because you're not borrowing money, paying interest rates. Now, Right now, it's somewhat favorable in that interest rates are 1.5%, 2%. I'm gonna tell you right now,
That ain't
it's
gonna
not
be
gonna
like that
stay
forever.
that way. And, if we get into an inflationary environment, the cost of borrowing is gonna be very difficult. So I'm just recommending that serious considerations are made with that. I understand this board is a little bit behind the 8 ball because you're kind of put in a situation where it's not been done before and maybe it needs to be done. But you've got an aging fleet, you've got 2 vehicles that are essentially hitting the 20-year point already. And then the third one's at 10, 12. So the village is gonna, in the near future, gonna be buying fire trucks. So, you know, just considerations to think about.
So I was just wondering if everybody's favorable to the 2 funds I'm proposing there. And I just had a thought on the SCBA fund. Well, I think it's essential to put that amount away. We have discussed, potentially when it comes time to make that replacement and the whole picture's clear of doing it, of attempting to get grant funded from the Federal Assistance to Firefighters Act, which we have been funded twice in the past 10 years. I think we have a good narrative and it works sometimes. SCBA's are frequently funded. There's obviously no promises there and it's not something that's about to happen, but I guess maybe that should, if we worded that fire equipment and we ended up being funded, you know, that could
Would be
yeah.
reserved for
Then we would
vehicles.
buy hose or whatever else with it, you know. So
Yeah,
I
well,
would,
it's a tight fund, so you do have the flexibility to, you don't have to earmark that it's that specific equipment. As long as
Right.
it has to do with fire apparatus, you can use that fund for.
well, no, I wasn't talking, I would like the command vehicle fund to be more specific.
It
so
has to
that-
be.
Right,
You don't have it, you can't, that's a specific fund, so you're gonna have to state exactly what you're gonna buy with it. Are you gonna buy a pumper truck with the money? Are you gonna buy a command
Right.
vehicle with the money? Are you gonna buy something else? That has to be specific.
so that one should be specific, but we should just, I would, you know, call the SCBA fund
Equipment.
the equipment would probably be good. You know, if we were lucky in the future to get funded when that picture becomes clear.
Yeah, as long as we're all on the same page, if that's the direction that we want you to sort of go for a vehicle down the road,
Right.
you know?
Well, the SCBA is something else that I got.
What, okay, I'm sorry.
That's the self-contained breathing apparatus.
Okay, all right, my apologies.
So the quick story on that is, you know, that's the life of a firefighter going in. They need that air supply and everything. So that's something you see. We spend money testing it, the bottles, everything like that. Very expensive. If we bought one right now, I think it's $5,000 on state contract. That doesn't even include the bottle, or the face piece. But that is built to a specific standard, as are the apparatus. Even though the NFPA is not the law, no one will make a piece of apparatus in this country that does not apply to that standard. Same thing goes with the SCBA. So we had been buying, or for a couple of years, we had bought some new ones, small amounts at a time, keeping it within the budget. For this, the standard changes every 5 years. For this proposed one, which was supposed to change in 2012, got pushed to 2013, big changes were a part of that. Basically, the warning for when you're running low on air used to be a quarter of your remaining cylinder. The committee changed that, which, to 1/3 of it remaining. Well, the quandary there is, do you then have a mixed batch of air packs out there where some are, you know, because if we bought 5 more, under the new standard, we'd have a mixed batch out there. Keeping this in mind, almost always when the standard comes out, there's an upgrade kit for the ones that are usually within 5 years, you bring them up. We did that in the past, grant funded, we upgraded everything to have the integrated path devices and everything like that, the CBURN rating, chemical biological. So, this new standard came out. The problem is, the United States Army lab that does the testing for the CBRN, for all those ratings, was doing it wrong since 2007, and it is like brought the final approval to a halt. So without the final approval, the manufacturer won't even design that upgrade. And the upgrade doesn't even come for 6 months after that. So we're not comfortable buying SCBA right now. We don't even think the upgrade's available. We're probably talking 2015. So that is the reason behind setting aside the money.
That makes sense.
We have about, what do we count? 14 that are upgradable. We have 23 total. We were thinking, you know, we're gonna need to buy 9. And then, the thing that's bothering me is how much this upgrade may cost, what I'm hearing. But there's no clear picture. I'm talking to some people with some intimate knowledge of how this is proceeding, and it's not good at all. But that's the reason why we gotta put it aside. That's the reason why, part of the reason why the ones that were budgeted for this year were not purchased, because we're not comfortable with that situation of having a mixed batch like that. And I don't think many departments are. You know, pretty much nobody's ordering right now.
You don't wanna have 2 firefighters in the fire, and one person's alarm is going, saying that he has to get out. You know, and the other person might have, you know, airlift that is hanging out, both of them have to get out. You want everybody to be, you know, the same, it's just an unsafe situation that you don't want to be.
And we're teaching them to the same device. It's just, it's not something we're comfortable, not pretty much something anybody's comfortable with. But that's why we're requesting, we know that that will be a big purchase, but it's something we don't think is gonna happen in this first fiscal year, and that's why we're asking for that amount to carry over. And then, so my revision to earmarking it for SCBA was, this would be something for us to seek in a grant, and if we did end up being successfully funded in the grant,
I see your point.
you know, if we just said it's fire equipment,
Right.
we could buy hose with it, or whatever, you know, if we were successful.
Sounds like a plan.
What's the year of those trucks again? One is 95.
So the 2 engines, which are the biggest ones, the most expensive, the newest one is a 2001, and then the other one is a 1995. And then our smaller vehicle, which people call the rescue or whatever, it's a personnel carrier, used for a lot of other uses, but definitely less expensive, doesn't have a pump on it or anything like that. That's a 1999. And that's something we probably not gonna wanna go over 20 with, honestly. It's probably overloaded now. The chassis is not, you know, is not very good for carrying the small amount of weight it has now.
But that's like an $80,000 vehicle versus a $500,000?
Not as, I think it probably cost 80,000 when they bought it in 1999. So I couldn't give you a good estimate of today's value. The engines are much easier, like, the one like, you know, the one that's 19 years old, which carries all our rescue equipment and stuff, that's basically 2 vehicles in one. It's a rescue truck and an engine together. I mean, to replace that is definitely, you know, a good guess, 480,000.
I think you're right. The 80,000 was about that time.
I almost think I saw the invoice for
Yeah,
that
about
99,
89.
that's probably what that one cost then.
One other consideration to make, and I think that this is probably a positive statement, you know, for the Highland Falls Fire District Department, is that the costs of the fire department in the village are about half of the town's costs. So the board could actually make considerations of maybe just allowing the fire department's budget to be up a little bit higher so you can put away some money. Because the town's fire district's at $400,000. Now that gets voted on, their budgets get voted on, you know, maybe 10 people show up to vote, but the point is that gets voted on. Personally, and again, I don't know a lot about firefighting, but I can't imagine that the Highland Falls Fire Department is only $200,000 and the Town of Highlands Fire Department has so much more that they're double the cost. So maybe part of the problem is maybe the village should put some more money away for the fire department in the village so that you can build some of these reserves. You know, I don't know, is the town, Eric, maybe you can, you know, is a town?
Well, I'll
require a
actually
lot
defend
more?
them a little more, only because, and I think we're very economical, and it is a compliment, and I will take it as that, but it's like an apples and oranges comparison, correct?
Okay.
For the fact that, we benefit actually from being a part of the village, because we get our fuel from there. The liability insurance is covering everything, instead of they have to get a separate policy for that. So there's a lot of things they have to do individually that were built in. We frequently use the village's mechanic to fix the small engines, you know. So there's a lot of benefits we get from being integrated into the village government. I also think we do, you know, I don't think there's any excess in here either, too. That's why I get nervous when you're talking about shaving these little parts off. But that's the beauty of being part of the village, you know, that we benefit from many of those, you know, costs that are in there. Meanwhile, when the fire district sets their budget, they're not benefiting from using the same fuel as this, and the mechanic, you know, they have to
Additional
go to.
expenses, yeah.
Their contractual expenses will probably eat up the majority of that budget. I mean, I haven't examined it, but, you know, that's what you deal with as a fire district. But the voters do get to vote on it and stuff like
Yeah.
that, but.
Well, I guess that's really the question is, you know, what's the issue, you know, because I'm starting to look at this, and again, I'm just financially looking at it, that maybe the fire department needs to plus up their budget to accommodate for replacement of equipment. You know, I'm just trying to be unvarnished about it, because you're running a $200,000 budget handling a relatively large area.
Right, if you go population to spending on us, I've always made that assertion to the past boards and this board and everything, that they're getting a bargain for fire protection. That's my personal opinion.
Well, yeah,
But I
and
think you push the numbers.
you might
and compare.
be able to back it in that way. I'm just thinking that, you know, would it make sense for the board to consider setting a reserve fund up for a truck? Look at some areas and other areas in the budget where maybe we can curtail certain things so that you start building this capital reserve to replace the truck. Because that's the biggest thing that I worry about, is the age of the fleet.
Wait, are you talking about cutting out of the fire department's
No,
budget?
no, I'm
Oh,
talking
okay.
about increasing the fire department maybe to 220 and adding a $20,000 or $15,000 capital reserve for a truck. Because if I just, and again, I'm not a fireman, I can't speak to the costs completely, but I just think that if you don't do it, you're gonna end up bearing the burden of that plus debt service down the road. And maybe it makes sense to start now, okay? Just a recommendation from what I'm seeing. I think the budget itself, from everything that these gentlemen have said, seems to be, you know, pretty reasonable, but.
And the only thing is, we never live with a 2% cap either. I'd like to see how that's gonna shake out.
Well, that's why you're
Yeah.
gonna, what you're gonna have to do, and I'll talk about
Yeah,
this a little
as
later.
the treasurer, do you have a specific idea in mind of where we're gonna cut, like $100,000?
Well, I have a couple,
Thank
But-
heavens.
Yeah, 'cause I don't.
but,
that's
but you're gonna have to be willing to do certain things that, that I think make sense, but you have to be willing to
Is
do
that
it.
what you want to discuss with us in executive
Well,
session?
the part of it I can discuss now, and that is restructuring our debt service, when it comes to our vans payable.
Well, I don't want to,
Yeah,
So
so there are
Right.
solutions. Again, I'm only putting out what I see in the future that I think you should
Oh, I agree,
consider.
and the capital reserve fund. for
What
the
you end
truck
up,
is
what you end up
important.
deciding to do is obviously dollars and cents is gonna play a large role in that. But it's very apparent to me that the fire district probably should be starting capital reserves for equipment. Because you're just gonna pile debt onto debt onto debt, to replace equipment, and I don't think long run, that's the way to do it.
And I think part of the reason why we're probably on the low end where we are is because in the 10 years, because I think in 2004, we were funded with an AFG grant where we replaced all that gear in 2005, and we bought all the portable radios, and then replaced those portable radios with an Entergy grant. So unfortunately, we've been doing a good job of getting grants, but it gets us into a situation when you get into the replacement areas like we are, and we're talking about sets of gear, that if we've been chronically under.
Successful on
Right.
grants.
We almost need to just realize, you know, that we're at the bare minimum, and then as, you know, prices go up and things like that, we really are not, you know, we could run into problems with things like this. We've been trying very hard over the last 5 years to stay ahead with things like the SCBA and stuff, but, I mean, the rigs are always something that is bothering me, because they just keep getting older every year.
Question for both
Don't
of
we
you.
all?
Question for both of you. How much lifespan you think left in your oldest truck?
I can't answer that question without the pump test,
Need the pump
honestly.
test. That pump test is key.
And the pump test could not indicate what we want it to. I mean, it could be, it doesn't give indications, there's not, there's no cracks in the frame or things like that. We do send it every year for PM. We haven't neglected them in that sense. And I've gradually increased that maintenance budget for that reason, for their age. So that there's nothing glaring out, but obviously, I mean, you could track this. Fleet managers do this in good departments and they know what's going on. The amount of issues that come up and the small ones all start to break. Yeah, that is up in that rate, the 1995. There's no way it goes more than 25. It just won't. But that's the fear. So then it gets to 25 and you're at the same time and all the other ones are getting 20. And the rescue doesn't have a lifespan beyond 20, even though it's the least expensive. And it's hard to judge where the 2001 will be at that time.
Well, one of the latest could go before the oldest then, right?
Right, that middle one, the rescue is, it says we waited, that chassis was under design, it doesn't pull the weight very well. We've updated relief springs and things like that, but it's, that's the reality of the situation. I mean, the 1995, we're not saying it needs to be replaced next year, but I think it would be naive to think that it's making it anywhere past 25. And that's a long time for, many places go with the 20-year life cycle. I mean, busier places, much less. A fire apparatus, a frontline engine or truck in the city of New York, 10 years, that's it.
No, the reason I asked that question because I'm not saying it's not good to set up a reserve fund, but even if you set up $10,000 a year,
We're not getting to where we need to be.
and
No,
you're
that's
still gonna have to bond or do something, you're gonna have to spend some money, even if you set up, you're not gonna be able to save that kind of money in that short period of time. So you're gonna have to spend some money someplace.
But there's a lot of money on the horizon. I think anything we can do to,
Because it's a factor
Yeah.
of two. So if you save 10, you save 20, because you don't have the debt service on the 10. So it's good to, you're not gonna, it's late in the game. So you're not gonna be able to get all the money between now and the next time you have to replace something. But there's a factor of, 2
not
might
saying
be a
that-
little high, but maybe factor 0.7, where 10 becomes 17, because you don't have to pay for the debt. And it becomes much larger if interest rates go up. So that's the compounding issue that I think is pretty important here. But again, we have cut time and we'll look at what needs to happen here and there. There's some ideas of how we can, find funding within the budget, within some of the things we do. But we also there's a lot of things out there that are difficult. You have contract issues, money related to that. You've got increased healthcare costs, you've got increased ERS and PFRS. If you factor in a 2% increase for employees, and then you add the tax cap in there, it's a very difficult scenario. But, you know, I'm just putting it out to think about. What we do is up to the board, obviously.
Good idea, though. Anything else?
No, the only other thing, I just asked that when Pat Patterson or whoever's going to be weighing in on that ancillary cost issue, all I need is just a letter from the group, the board, that states what their expenses are gonna be, because we're kinda caught by surprise this year with that cost, that additional $2,500. So we kinda need a commitment on that from the board, fire board, as to the money. I've earmarked 500, if it's more than that, that's gonna have to be stated in the letter.
The only other line other than the fire department there is there's the workman's comp, but you usually get that number.
Yeah, I got that, that's not, you don't.
I like to know it though, it kinda tells me if I'm doing, we always like to know it.
Yeah,
I didn't
well-
know, did it go up or down or anything like that?
Well, right now, I've left it flat,
Okay.
so there's nothing outrageous, but it certainly, workman's comp has issues in other areas, it's a total.
Okay,
So right now, we got you at 31.
all right, that's nice, that's not really been.
You haven't had any major
Oh,
incidents,
don't
right?
say it, don't say it.
No.
This is for my
So,
gut.
So I guess, you guys be in touch if you have questions or whatever.
Yeah.
I think everything we requested is honestly, nothing's a luxury here. Even the iPads, we waited long enough till it became something that was practical for here, but, the challenges of this day and age with the vehicles and the types of construction in this really make those more of a necessity than a luxury, honestly.
And they're priced compared to a couple of these.
Right, so my friend in chief of Minnesota, for 13 fire apparatus and 7 chief's vehicles, he did that entire fleet with what it would cost to do 2 with the tough quote ABL systems. So,
You all set? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
thanks, guys.
Yes.
Two New York Giants players are to the sports school. Thanks.
Okay, let's talk about a couple things. The first thing is our bonds. As we all know, when we look at the budget, we have bands that are transcending dates and amounts, and they're all over the place. One of the things I'd like to do is to try to consolidate our bands to fall on at least 1 or 2 dates sometime in the springtime, and so that we're not necessarily having to pay off, reissue bands 5 times a year for all these different functions. The other thing that I think, because of some of these costs that you guys have been kind of dropped in your lap, which has to do with your police negotiations, if you decide to do a fire department reserve for a truck, factor in some health costs, you factor in some of the bond balloon situations that we have. You can slow down the payments of your bands. So let's say typically a band is five-year payback, if you can do it. Your bond resolutions on some of your bands call for 15 years and 30 years, and anything in between. I haven't looked at each resolution, but I looked at 2, and one was for 15, the other was for 30. What that basically says is that you can make those payments over a 15-year period, even though it's a band. So instead of, let's say it's a $400,000 band, in the 5-year term, you would pay $80,000 a year. If you decided, you know what, we'll extend that because, number one, we want to reorganize the bands to fall in a similar year, which would force us to have 2 payments in 1 year. But those payments can be smaller payments that would aggregate to, let's say on a 5-year band, let's say we decide, let's make 2 $20,000 payments. So we have $40,000 in payments for this year. That will allow us to cycle the ban to March or whatever we choose. And then one of the other bans that we have that, let's say, gets has to be paid off and repurchased in August, we set that one up to pay $20,000 in August and then another $20,000 next March, so that cycles to a March date. And then we take the one that I was saying that ballooned from, if I recall, 60,000 to 112. The reason why it went to 112 is because if you're gonna pay it off in 4 years, you gotta pay the remaining 440,000 or whatever the number is at 112,000.
Yeah, it had been 50,000.
It had been
ballooned
50
up
and
to
then it ballooned
112.
up because that first 50 was less than what you would factor in on a 5-year repayment on 400,000 by $30,000. So, but what you can do, like I said, because these resolutions give you longer periods of time, you can actually lower the amount, and that will
The
free
amount
up.
per year,
Correct.
but doesn't this fly in the face of the rationale you were just projecting with the fire truck? That you're extending the payments or you're extending the debt period so that cost
You are
goes up.
doing that, but you're doing it in a low interest rate environment.
Do you lock the rate in when we do that, Ed, or is that
Well, you-
change every time you go to refinance?
Every ban you go in with a new rate potential.
So we can't lock it in for.
You lock it for a year.
Just 1 year?
Sure, because it's not a serial bond. So you're locking it in for a year. At the end of the day, the amount of debt the village has, you're going to turn these into bonds anyway. Okay, because you're not gonna, you don't have the ability to pay in back in 5 years. You don't. Unless somebody decides to be a big benefactor, or we find oil in the village, or fracking, or we have a natural gas field under here, or whatever. The reality is you're not going to be able to pay those back, especially with a 2% tax cap environment, unless you decided we're not gonna worry about the tax cap, which politically is difficult to do because of the rebate program now being introduced, which is why a lot of members of the villages and towns at the Association of Towns meeting were ready to storm the podium of the guy from the state budget office who was basically acting like the 2% such a great thing. Well, it's great for taxpayers, but it's not necessarily great for trying to square away your financial situation, especially in a case like the village here with the debt. So all I'm saying is if you slow down your band payments, there's two things we can accomplish. The first is we can marry all our band payments at a common date, so that we're not paying for 3 closings or 4 closings with the attorneys, okay? That we are actually paying a larger chunk toward the end of the year, so in a better interest rate environment, those funds sit and collect interest at a higher rate, let's say. You know, when we typically put a bunch of money in one of our accounts that gives us more interest on a couple $1 million, that's a significant amount of interest gains. And then the second part is it will free up $150,000 that you're not paying your bonds off with, and you would then be able to use it to help out in other areas. Again, it's not ideal. You've been left with
Yeah.
a lot of mess to deal with.
Would it be better just to go long now with rates as low as they're gonna be?
You mean as far as making serial bonds?
Yeah.
Yeah, eventually you could, but the first step is to try to marry all this together, because you're still gonna have some potential bond activity coming up anyway, okay? There's gonna be other things that are gonna come up that are gonna, you know, drainage issues or some other types of things that go on in the village that you don't have the money for.
And we don't know what it is at this point.
So what you would do then is that when some of that money becomes maybe due, that's maybe when we go for a whole serial bond and basically tie it all in together. I have shifted us to working directly with Dan Birmingham with Hawkins. Dan's great. He is actually gonna do our closing coming up on the 400,000 borrowing that we have for the water plant.
Is he coming here? Or-
He's gonna take care of the closing documents. We'll work out the arrangements of where we do the closing, but what that helps us in is that he is always going to be called upon to do the serial bonds anyway. Our local law firm doesn't go that far. They just handle the band, typically the band stuff. Hawkins will handle soup to nuts, so we'll have one bond counsel from the inception all the way to when we turn them into serial bonds. And they're really good. I really believe that they do business for the village anyway, because when we go to refi on a serial, they do it anyway. That's their expertise. So it's a consideration that I think when we start to look at where we're at, it's a consideration that you might want to, factor in. It's not one that's ideal, because obviously you want to pay your debt off as fast as you can, but you have two things going for you. One, it is a low interest rate environment, and number two, it will give you some, quote, cap room to handle some of these other things. Like, again, there's a large liability with contracts, okay? And that liability of salary liability, if you don't set up for it now, you're gonna borrow the money for it.
Well, for instance, with the police contract, and I guess there was a certain percentage that was supposed to have been set aside, but was spent, so we are left holding the bag on that?
Well, I wouldn't characterize it as spent, it's in fund balance. Whatever that fund balance is, a lot of these things that are earmarked all the way along are sitting in that fund balance. Okay, now last year, the assessment of the fund balance was, I think, $245,000. I believe the fund balance is larger than that, but you typically in budgeting give a conservative estimate. You don't want to miss to going the other way. All right, so yeah, there's considerations in the budget for that, but there's also things that go on in the budget that, like a lot of the overtime expense. I haven't checked it, but I'm not sure that every bit of overtime that's been incurred last year was budgeted for. So, where does that come from? Assets minus liabilities is your fund balance. So if you have a little more liabilities than you budget for, your fund balance goes down. Okay? And when I looked at the budgeting from years before, water and sewer fund balance was zero put in there. A couple of years ago it was 10,000 or whatever. Fund balance has been dropping also for the A fund. And that just points out to expenses are outweighing revenues, and you're having to go into your reserves, your quote fund balance reserves to pay for it. We're still in the positive, but you strain those reserves more and more.
Well, will you have an adequate handle on what the actual fund balance is in the next couple weeks, so we know what to do with some of these
I
contracts?
know the fund balance of last year, because the auditors audited all the books. We do an estimate. We do an estimate of where we think we are. You can't determine a fund balance until the fiscal year is over, because you still have activity, right? So you do an estimate of your fund balance.
Interesting. At one point in time, as far as bonding goes, is there a constitutional debt limit that we're approaching, or?
No, we have to do a calculation, but
Yeah.
we're okay. That's a function of our assets in the village
Right.
to the amount of debt. There's certain percentages. I think our debt limit is somewhere around 22, 23 million.
Okay.
I
So,
remember looking it up once.
I did too,
We're far away
yeah,
from
yeah.
it, but that said, we don't wanna get any
No,
closer to
we're not
it.
as far as maybe we could be. Look, for a small village like this, having over $10 million in debt is a lot. It's a lot. So, that's always gonna be an albatross right now. This isn't the only village that has that problem. This is the only town that has that problem. But it's a factor. Again, and I'm always gonna come from the conservative side fiscally, so that I do have a bias there, because I really believe that you shouldn't borrow what you can't pay back, per se, but there is a role for debt in the economy. There's a lot of people are very rich because they leverage debt to make them a lot of money, okay? But you gotta be careful on how you do it. You gotta make sure that at the end of the day, you're walking out a winner, right? With what we've got here, we do have these considerations. If we didn't have the tax cap, you would probably be looking at to try to pay down your debt to have a higher tax increase. But you can't do that. I don't think you can do that, because then you avoid the rebate program that's being put forward. And, you know,
I
it's not,
think,
you get backed in a corner.
I think we're all committed to staying under that 2%.
Absolutely, this is the first year that we've done a budget that we had to comply with that, right? I mean, do we?
Second.
No, last
Second,
year.
what's last year?
Last year
Okay.
was.
Yeah, second.
You know, so it's like, it's sort of still a new area as far as I'm concerned, as far as taxes go. Because I remember sometime to do a tentative budget, we were coming in 6, 8, 9%, 13% over, then we shaved stuff off them, but it was, 2% was always a hard number to hit, you know, under, so well, hopefully we can do that.
It's 2% of tax levy.
Right.
Our actual tax increase could be more than that.
Because some things get taken out, some
Yeah.
certain debts get
Yeah, I know
taken out.
it's a little hard.
There's a formula
Yeah.
that you plug in. So that's one consideration. The other thing is when we look at the budget, I talked about water rates, okay? We'll budget basically on where we are now, but I really think the board has to seriously consider after June 1st, trying to get your water rates to match the cost of running the water department. And if that's 1%, 2% each year, you then avoid a scenario where 3, 4 years down the road, you're popping at 7, 6, and then people are outraged because they're like, what the heck's going on? And somebody gave me a very good example. People don't complain about, well, they might not, let's put it this way, they might complain, but they don't do anything about it when they have their cell phone bill or their cable bill, okay? Essentially, but for whatever reason, when the water bill goes up, that's like horrible. But I think when you start your priority list, your water, you know, it's kind of more important than anything. So that's a consideration. We have to consider what we want to do with the attorney, the village attorney. You got $40,000 earmarked there. Engineering, you got $25,000 earmarked there. You are going to get a big pickup by the board's decision on what you're going to do with public works. Okay, that is a potential $75,000 benefit to your bottom line. But then you have $50,000 put away for potential senior center improvements. You know, the reality is that you'd like to do it, but can you? Can you fiscally do it? You should, my recommendation is with overtime, that we factor in a 5% overtime factor for overtime. I'm still trying to figure out the mechanism to get it on the sheet here. It's either going to be put as part of the salary line, or if it's permissible, we'll make it a 011 line. So it will fall like in let's say Central Communications 3020.011, and be able to put that as the overtime line, so it's separate from the salary line. So you can, but again, we're running last year 10+% overtime rates. My recommendation is you cut that in half. That frees up $100,000 that year.
That sounds attractive.
Yeah. So when we start looking around, if we reschedule the way we handle our debt, if we cut overtime by the 5%, if we get increased revenues from sales tax, that's possible. We could get some more revenues from sales tax. There's some estimates there. We'll talk revenues on Monday, because that's our next step, is going over the revenue lines. And that's a little bit easier because there's not a lot of, other than taxpayers, there's not a whole lot of other options. unless you wanna put it all on black at the new casino in Orange County. But, you're potentially finding, you know, a good $200,000+. So, and my estimates are you have around $200,000 of your 2% availability. So maybe you're sitting there with $400,000 having to pluck off your police contract, having to pluck off, your, increased 2% increase for employees, having to pluck off your increased healthcare costs, your increased ERS, PFRS costs. You do have a little bit of debt cost, that's because of the $800,000 worth of borrowing this year that we're doing for the sewer and water plants. But again, those are supposed to stand alone because they're supposed to be paid for by your rates that you set. And I'm just throwing things out because these are where our considerations are going to be. You do have your, let's see, what else is there? Snow removal we have to factor in. This year to next year, my recommendation is that we pretty much set it up that we're putting about $90,000 to $95,000 for equipment for that. I think, like I said, I think the board made a tremendous move by dual hatting your DPW. That's a tremendous savings for you. Nobody lost a job. One member picked up additional responsibilities for a reasonable compensation plan. It's too bad it doesn't always work that way, because that's a home run right there. That, to some degree, that changes a lot of your dynamics. That's like a $150,000 swing between having to pay that and not. So, so that's part of the calculus here. Because we'll set up reserve funds based on what you want. We'll put the line items in, and then at the new fiscal year, you guys will do some board actions to set the reserve funds up. We'll budget for them. You'll do the board actions to authorize them, and then those monies will go into the standard proper accounts for reserve funds.
Would we talk about the highway department? Was the water plant had a reserve fund for vehicle too, or?
We can establish a capital
Well,
reserve.
Yeah, I'm just, that's not such a tremendous cost that we couldn't wrap up in a short-term borrowing or just pay for it. But I'm just wondering if we, with the highway department, they have larger, like the loader. What'd they say, a loader was 150, 160 grand now, where a few years back it was 8 years ago it was 100?
Plus we have a $31,000 repair bill.
Right, so that's a major expense. The vehicle is not so much a major expense for the village, but the fire truck is a major expense as far as I'm concerned, because that's gonna cost us a ton of money, so I think reserve funds are imperative in those two departments anyway.
Sure. Again, you gotta start sometime.
Yeah.
I am in favor of a reserve fund. It does make sense, but also keep in mind the whole notion of bonding something is so you don't put all of the burden on the current taxpayers for something that taxpayers 20 years down the line are going
Enjoy.
to have, yeah, I won't say enjoy.
I enjoy,
but-
Yeah, but your bonding is generational already anyway.
Right, so
Well-
we've already, like, when you moved here, there was long-term debt that somebody else paid, so you have to look at it like, somebody paid the first 20 years of the bond that I'm enjoying.
Take a good, if you want, spend a little time reading the GASB 45 that was done by Dan Zinger. When you read that, you'll be like, is there any window of opportunity?
You just have to
Because
understand that.
your long-term obligations for employee pensions and everything like that, it's unsustainable. It's true. Unless they print money, and then, the helicopter comes around, Highland Falls, here you go, a couple $1 million, and they'll cure your ills. Look, economically in this country, we're in uncharted territory. We have more debt than has ever been put together.
And don't have a plan on how to pay it.
And the story historically has always ended badly. Talk to the Romans, talk to the Greeks, talk to, who was the last one that collapsed?
Well, look at Greece, Greece is a good example in our lifetime, just looking at
Yeah.
the financial situation
Yeah.
over there because of what they have.
Yeah.
We're, I mean, we're much better off, but 20 years from now, I don't know if I could argue that point.
No, but again, our fiduciary responsibility here is to try to do what we can here, and taxpayer is front and center on all of this. You know, some people feel a 2% tax cap's a gimmick. I think it's a combination personally, but if you look at the reaction of officials, it's not good. So, so that's where we're at. I'd like for Monday, I'd like to have maybe some input on what you want to do is in relation to the bond program that I'm recommending. It's not my preference, but I don't know how you're able to stay under the 2% without major cuts somewhere, without being creative, and it's not creative, it's completely correct, but with your bands. And if you go that route, we will get on a road where we'll have a common maturity, and then we'll get a serial bond in, and then hopefully next year our rates are still in the, you know what, our representative I was talking to basically said he feels if we consolidate all this, we could knock off 80 basis points off of our rate. We cut our interest payments in half on several $1 million. That's a significant savings, but no financial institution's interested in $400,000 really. The cost of paperwork almost blows away any admin fees they get. So, but on a couple $1 million note, there are people out there that will pay a percent and 10.
Well, next week, will you give us a rundown of what this proposal actually is in dollars and cents and?
I can't know that quickly. That's gonna take some time. What I can do is I can give you recommendations for what we should put away for those payments. Okay, how much we should be earmarking for those payments for budget purposes here. The first part of this effort is to try to move all of our bands to a common date. I don't know right now, without dedicating a lot of time to that, what the exact numbers are going to be. I can tell you that 80 basis points under any circumstance is going to be significant savings over what we're doing now with bands. Because remember, our latest offering for the water tank, I believe, was 1.8, I think it was like 1.86 or 1.89. Gina, do you recall did you see the number?
The one that came in today?
Yeah.
196.
196. Okay, so you're looking at 196 with the potential on a serial bond to go to 1.1. That's 86 basis points.
So, $2 million, you said?
Whatever it ends up being aggregate, because you know we have bands. You know, you've got $950,000 for water tank painting. You've got $400,000